Okay, so we're going to be talking about Brooklyn. This is a song by Ehud Banai, one of the four that we're exploring in this series. A little bit of background about Ehud Banai. His first album was released in 1987, contained like several hits, and he's been a successful singer-songwriter ever since, going forward to this very day. He comes from a famous showbiz family with uncles and cousins and nephews and nieces. There's a Yuval Banai and a Meir Banai and a Yossi Banai and an Orna Banai, Evyatar Banai. They're either involved in music or TV or both. This song comes from his 2004 album, Answer Me, Aneli, and it deals with issues which come up more and more as his music develops. A connection to his religious background, Persian background, begin to influence either the sounds of his music and or the subjects that he deals with in his music. And this song is a kind of a travel log, but also kind of a spiritual journey, as Ehud Banai, the Israeli, takes a trip to Brooklyn and walks around Brooklyn, finding it difficult to see Brooklyn without his Israeli eyes, without his Israeli ways of looking at things. And as a result, Brooklyn emerges as a very different city in the experience of Banai and therefore the experience of the listener to his song. So I recommend you now go and click and listen to the song. Up in the top right over where there's that little eye, it'll link you to the song. Also, the link is down below the video as well. So you go listen to and watch the song, and then we will continue. So, as I'm sure you've noticed, one of the fascinating things about the song is the way in which Banai kind of Jerusalemizes Brooklyn. That all of a sudden the phraseology and idioms which are used to describe his experience are kind of Jerusalem language and not Brooklyn language. For example, holy Brooklyn, profane Brooklyn, which is playing off this idea of the differentiation between the sacred and the profane. We're often told that Shabbat is the sacred day and the other 6 days are more profane. Then we also have some sort of mystical Kabbalistic references that the idea of God or the God essence being revealed or hidden in a particular place on earth. We have this happening inside Brooklyn, the hidden and the revealed aspects of Brooklyn, almost as if Brooklyn is some kind of a divine presence in and of itself. And then, of course, this great little play on words when Banai talks about higher Brooklyn and subway Brooklyn. The Hebrew is the language which is used to describe the more spiritual aspects of Jerusalem and the more mundane day-to-day aspects of Jerusalem. It's normally Yerushalayim shel Ma'ala and Yerushalayim shel Mata, Jerusalem of high and Jerusalem of low. But here, Banai does this lovely play on words where he uses Brooklyn shel Ma'ala and then he goes Brooklyn Tachtit. And Tachtit is also a word for being lower, but it's actually the word for a subway or for an underground. And so instead of higher and lower, it's higher and underground subway Brooklyn. A really cute play on words and a play on this idea that Brooklyn is Jerusalem and also not entirely Jerusalem. A few more references. We have this reference to Reb Shlomo, and this is indeed a reference to Shlomo Carlebach, or Carlebach, who was known as the singing rabbi of the 60s, and many of his songs are sung in synagogues throughout the world and in Israel. He also made a very significant impact in Israel. Songs like Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael. That was one by Shlomo Carlebach. He was the kind of guy who would write these songs that sounded like they were 2,000 years old, but had in fact been created by some guy in the 70s. We also have Brooklyn of Sue, who returned to be Sarah. We understand that this is actually a true story, that Banai met a volunteer on a kibbutz in Israel called Sue, and she eventually became Sarah and went to synagogue. I'll reach you when a taxi stops for me. So this is a cracking way in which Banai is taking the mundane and almost the irritating and raising it to an existential question. I'll reach you when a taxi stops for me. He talks about this episode when explaining the song, that he did find himself stuck in Brooklyn of an evening and no taxi was going to stop for him, which is a familiar experience for many folks from Brooklyn. But at the same time, he's raising this question of where is he trying to get to? Where is he going to reach? And what is it that's stopping him getting there? And is this a kind of a divine taxi or something more mundane? And then Brooklyn says Father is not dead, he's just sleeping a bit in the world of truth. He'll return in style singing songs of praise and will fling Brooklyn all the way to the land of Israel. So here, Banai is referring to the Rebbe of Lubavitch, the Lubavitcher Rebbe who died and yet was seen by many of his followers as the Messiah who was about to reveal himself. And so there is a very significant element of Lubavitcher Hasidim who are still waiting for the Rebbe to rise up from the dead and be the Messiah who will lead the Jewish world to redemption. As an element of this fascination with the Rebbe of Lubavitch, we even have a replica of 770 Parkway, this central Lubavitch house in Brooklyn. There's actually an exact replica of this house built in Jerusalem, in Kfar Chabad, and even in Arad. And now you. So Banai is visiting Brooklyn with the eyes of someone visiting Jerusalem. What might a walk through Brooklyn feel like with these references in mind? Like if you were going to wander around Brooklyn and look at it and imagine it through the language and the concepts of the holy city of Jerusalem, what might that walk feel like? And vice versa, what if you were to take your understandings and references and connotations of Brooklyn and keep them with you as you walked through Jerusalem? Would you see things differently? Would you experience it differently? On his way to Brooklyn, Banai wonders excitedly, "Do you have within you what my heart seeks?" Which is a very interesting thing to be thinking before you arrive in a city. These expectations which are emotional, spiritual. And do you ever have that kind of thought in your heart when you're on the way to Israel? Do you find yourself asking the same kind of question? Okay, Israel, do you have within you what my heart seeks? Or what would you say your heart does seek when you're on the way to Israel? Wandering the Jewish areas of Brooklyn, Banai the Israeli notes this idea that I am not from here, but not wholly foreign. Ani lo mikan, aval lo mamash zar. Are there places where you feel something similar, this half alienation, half familiarity? Do you sometimes feel this when you come to Israel, that you as a Jew not living in Israel, when you arrive in Israel or wander around the streets of Israel, do you also feel, I'm not from here, but not wholly foreign? And what does this feel like? Is this a happy feeling, a confused feeling, an uncomfortable feeling? And finally, how do you interpret the cryptic near to final line when Banai sings, I won't be here tomorrow, I'm only today? And this translation does represent the Hebrew, which is, it's not I'm only going to be here today, I'm only around for one day. It's Ani rak hayom, I am only today. How does that meet you? So thanks for being with us. This has been a guide and an exploration of Brooklyn by Ehud Banai. I'm Robbie Greengrass, and we've brought this to you from Makom, the Israel Education Lab of the Jewish Agency, together with our project with Moshe House, which has been generously supported by the Jim Joseph Foundation.